Chapter 25. The long, tortuous trail of publishers and translators led Hatter to Christ Church College in Oxford, England. He stood outside the door of a bachelor's apartment in Tom Quad. The time was 12:30 p.m. He was closer to finding Alice Hart than he had been in 13 years. On the other side of the door, Charles Dodgson, a.k.a. Lewis Carroll. He knocked. "Who's there?" a voice called. "My name is Hatter Madigan. I am a member of the Wonderland's Millinery, and I've come to find Princess Alice Hart." There was a long pause from the other side of the door. Then, I don't know who sent you, but this isn't funny. It is Sunday, sir, and not today for whimsy. Hatter stood outside the door long enough to realize that Dodgson was not going to open it. Shrink! The blades of his left bracelet began slicing the air, and he pushed them back into the door. It splintered apart, and Hatter stepped through the opening into a small, warm room where a fire burned in the hearth. Dodgson jumped up, spilling tea onto the rug and dropping his fountain pen, which dripped ink onto the pages of his journal. "I beg your..." Dodgson started backing into a corner of the room. Hatter snapped shut his wrist blades. The man before him had the brightest glow of anyone he'd ever seen. "Where's Princess Alice?" "Who?" "Princess Alice of Wonderland. I know you've been in contact with her. I'm in possession of your book." As Hatter reached into a pocket of his millinery coat, Dodgson whimpered, "Please, no!" But Hatter was only reaching for a copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. He returned the book to his pocket, strode to the writing desk, and flipped through the pages of Dodgson's journal. "Do you know who I am?" I think I know who you're supposed to be, but I can't say that I find this at all amusing. Did Alice send you to make fun of me?" "I've searched many years for the princess, more than half her life, and made little progress. But now I've found you." "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious, and I will find her whether or not you tell me where she is. But it will be better for your health if you help me." "But I've hardly seen her in 9 years. She refuses to have anything to do with me." Hatter considered the sadness, the mournful reminiscence in the Reverend's tone. The man was telling the truth. "Where do I find her?" "She lives at the deanery here at Christ Church." Hatter was about to ask where the deanery was, but his eye alighted on a newspaper spread open on the tea table. One of the headlines caught his attention. "Alice in Wonderland weds. Lewis Carroll's muse Alice Liddell to marry Prince Leopold." Alice Liddell? "She goes by a different name," he asked aloud, but more to himself than to Dodgson, who said nothing. There was urgency in his voice when he asked this time. "Where is the deanery?" In the next quad, the blue door, but what?" "She is currently at Kensington Palace preparing for..." Hatter snatched up the newspaper and bolted from the apartment, scanning the article as he sprinted in the direction of London. Why had the princess taken a different name? How could she pretend to be an ordinary, soon-to-be married young lady of Earth? He hadn't known what to expect when he found the princess. Perhaps a young woman not quite ready to fulfill her destiny, a woman who would need convincing of her own powers and whom the bravery of a warrior queen was not yet second nature. But he hadn't expected this. Kensington Palace. Hatter ran toward the front gate, showed no sign of stopping. "Halt!" one of the guards ordered. Hatter leaped, somersaulted over the gate, and dropped to a crouch, startling a young baby-faced guard patrolling the grounds. The guard tripped, his rifle went off, and Hatter spun with the force of the bullet. He had never been shot before. Incredulous, he touched the bloody wound. The guard stared at Hatter, paralyzed, unsure of what to do. Whistles were blown, the clap and patter of running feet all around. The wild, angry barking of guard dogs set loose. Hatter had little choice but to run. The bullet had hit him in the shoulder, severing tendons and ligaments, shattering bone. He couldn't move his right arm. It hung limp, banging against his side, trailing blood. With his free hand, he put constant pressure on the wound to stop the bleeding. With difficulty, he jumped over the palace wall and hurried into a darkened street, got 2/3 of the way down it before he discovered that it was a dead end. The pack of dogs had already closed in when 3 guards appeared at the street's entrance, came forward with drawn rifles and bayonets, squinting into the shadows where Hatter stood, trapped. No doubt a dagger or corkscrew would have whistled out of the darkness into their vitals if Hatter had had no other choice. But when the guards reached the end of the drive, it was empty, deserted. They saw only a puddle on the ground where no puddle should naturally have been, the dogs growling at it until, with a few tentative sniffs, they began to lap up the dirty water. Chapter 26. After 13 years, morale among the Elysians was low. They languished in conditions hardly fit for mud-grubbing wormies. Every day brought defections and security breaches. The unspoken consensus was that a meaningful victory like the one at Blackstick would never be theirs again. Driving Red out of Wonderland had once been a realistic vision, but the Elysians were now reduced to a handful of splinter groups striking at insignificant targets in remote regions, an outpost monitoring Jabberwocky movement in the volcanic plains, or a weighing station for corpse-laden mail transports at the edge of the chessboard desert. Red had made it known that she would reward those who turned traitor to the Elysian cause. 1 and 2 at a time, Elysians surrendered to members of the Cut and divulged the location of Elysian camps. The camps would be bombarded with cannonball spiders and glowing orb generators, or flattened to dust by Red's rose rollers, onyx tank-like vehicles with treads of black, toothy roses. Defectors were never heard from again. But Elysians, with their own thoughts of defecting, chose to believe that their former comrades were too drunk on the pleasures of Red's reward to send word. The truth was, surrendering Elysians were bound hand and foot, their limbs and chests slashed to spur the appetites of the flesh-eating roses, and thrown into pits where the roses ate them alive. At the oldest of all Elysian camps, deep within the everlasting forest, General Doppelganger had called together a meeting of advisors. The camp was protected by a Stonehenge of massive, intricately balanced mirrors reflecting the sky and forest, an unending vista of foliage and clouds to confuse the not quite all-seeing eye of Red's imagination, as well as any of the Cut who happened to be dealt with through the forest. The mirrors were not connected to the crystal continuum and had been scavenged from labor camps raided in the first year of Elysian activity. Guards patrolled the perimeter, and a mirror keeper was responsible for maintaining the mirrors' delicate balance, shifting them here and there according to changes in light, cloud movement, and the bloom and rot of the seasons. To the untrained eye, and unless you were directly in front of a mirror and glimpsed your own reflection, a thing not so likely considering the complicated overlap of mirrors at myriad angles, the fragmented nature of their reflections, the camp was invisible. She's offering a small portion of Wonderland, probably in outer wilder bestia, but still to be decided, in exchange for a cessation of all rebel activity, said a plump fellow wedged into a chair and wearing a long mantle common among young men of suit families. We will be free to govern ourselves unmolested, but we will give up the name of the Elysians. We won't have to swear our loyalty to Red or the ways of black imagination, but we won't be able to practice white imagination either. She has proposed a summit to work out the details of the agreement. Why'd she pick you to deliver the message? Asked the Rook. If he'd been face to face with Red, he would have known how to take advantage of it. Red would have found the Elysian response to her offer at the point of his sword. The plump gentleman adjusted his white powdered wig. He was none other than Jack of Diamonds, now grown into this flabby, overfed man. His prominent rear ballooned out from both sides of his chair, tussocks of flesh swelling from between the armrests and seat cushion. I don't know, he said. I was powdering my wig when her image appeared in my looking glass. She must have thought I'd no sense when I heard it, since I come from a ranking family. It sounds suspicious, said the knight. Are you sure one of Red's seekers didn't follow you here? Please, I'm not new to the ways of subterfuge and secrecy, you know. The Rook grunted. It's a trick in any case. Jack of Diamonds had doubled his family's fortune since Red's ascension to the throne. His powers of observation had served him well in a society where only the shrewdest, most opportunistic, most selfish, and least loyal to friends flourished. As a boy, he had frequently accompanied the Lady of Diamonds to Red's fortress on Mount Isolation. It was the best education he could have received. Watching his mother flatter the queen and paying rare crystals to get whatever small concessions she wanted, studying Red's negotiations with arms dealers and entertainment impresarios who wanted licenses to poach Jabberwocky from the volcanic plains and pit them against one another in Wondertropolis's amphitheater. Strictly speaking, he was not an Elysian, more a Jackian, only concerned with his own well-being and profit. With Red's permission, he procured food for the Elysians. In exchange, he provided her with intelligence on their military maneuvers, intelligence from which he left out important details. If the Elysians were decimated, he would not be quite so rich. His methods were indirect and labyrinthian, but they brought him twice the profit of simpler business arrangements. He would learn when a shipment of cannonball spiders was leaving a factory, and then, using a reprogrammed glass eye as intermediary to protect his identity, he would sell this information to certain unsavory individuals. Once the theft had been carried out, his glass eye would inform on the criminals to Red's authorities, but by the time the authorities interrogated the criminals and discovered where the cache of cannonball spiders was hidden, Jack would have already removed it and sold it to the Elysians. "You think we should agree to the summit?" General Doppelganger asked him. "I don't see what choice we have. Knight, what do you say?" "She is not to be trusted, but I will follow your orders, whatever they may be." General Doppelganger sighed, and much as a drop of water might divide in half to form two identical droplets, split in two. Generals Doppel and Ganger paced the floor. There were two others who should have been at the meeting. The royal secretary, Bibwit Hart, had been unable to attend. It wasn't often that he could safely get away from Red. And Dodge Anders. Nobody knew where he was. He was frequently off by himself. No one knew where, and no one had ever felt right to ask. He was such a brooding and private man. "General Doppel." "Yes, General Ganger." The generals stood looking at each other for a moment, nodded. They had reached a conclusion. General Doppel spoke. "Obviously, we don't trust Red either, but we agree with Jack of Diamonds. Our forces are weakening. Before long, Red won't have to bother with the pretense of making any deal with us." "Then I'll arrange it," said Jack of Diamonds, attempting to wrench himself free of his chair. "I look forward to the day when I can sit with you all on some decent furniture. Now, if someone would help me..." The generals didn't mention their contingency plan to smuggle key Elysians into Borderland and make an under-the-table agreement with King Arch to overthrow Red, receiving soldiers and weapons in exchange for the promise of a male ruler. For now, they decided to keep this plan a secret, even from their advisors, hoping necessity wouldn't demand its implementation. Chapter 27. Dodge stood on the cliff above the Pool of Tears. The water sloshed and lapped in the breeze. Whether it was the wind that caused it or something else, he wouldn't have admitted, but a tear fell from his cheek into the water below. How he missed his father. How he wished he could still believe in the queendom of Genevieve's time, the one he had lived in a long lifetime ago, when he and Alice used the palace as their playground. But those years of innocence and indulgence belonged to someone else, another Dodge, not the man standing here. He turned to leave, saw something on the surface of the pool, a male figure swimming with difficulty toward the crystal barrier shore. The trees and shrubs and flowers began to chatter, and Dodge charged down a steep, rocky path to the edge of the pool, stumbling, not caring if he fell. The Wonderlander swam using only one arm. No wonder he was having trouble. But even after so many years, Dodge recognized him. "You're Hatter Madigan." "Yes." He helped Hatter out of the water and saw that the milliner was injured. Hatter's shirt was torn, his right shoulder sopped with blood. Through a ragged hole of tissue and muscle, Dodge could see crumbs of bone. He pulled off his coat and made a tourniquet out of it to slow Hatter's loss of blood. "I'm Dodge Anders, the son of Sir Justice, who used to command the Royal Guardsmen." "I remember you." "We were told you were dead, that the cat..." It makes no difference if I am alive or dead, except as it concerns the princess. I will not completely fail to fulfill my promise to Queen Genevieve. Princess Alice Hart is alive. She's grown into a woman old enough to return and claim her place as the rightful queen. Dodge had long ceased to be surprised by negative twists of fate. But Princess Alice alive? Hatter Madigan returned to Wonderland through the Pool of Tears? It's been a long time since anything good happened, he said, staring at Hatter until it occurred to him that he ought to get the man out of the open to where his shoulder could be examined in safety. Dodge decided not to risk a portal run. The millinery man leaned on him for support as they traveled by that most archaic of Wonderland means. They walked through the whispering woods and into the slum of Wondertropolis. You won't recognize this place, Dodge said. Hatter did recognize some of the buildings, as dilapidated as they were, but he couldn't afford to feel sorrow for the changes wrought in the capital city since Red's coup. He was exhausted and wanted sleep. He had to stop several times to rest. He could no longer feel his right arm. Not much farther, Dodge said when they entered the everlasting forest. They came upon Elysian guards patrolling what looked to Hatter like more forest, indistinguishable from the rest. The guards stopped in disbelief when they saw him, glances roving from Hatter's face to his bracelets and back. They bowed and stepped aside. You've returned into a legend, Dodge explained. You and Princess Alice. They entered the Elysian camp through an opening between two mirrors. Elysian soldiers fell silent at the sight of Hatter. Whispers of the milliner's return spread rapidly through the camp. Dodge led Hatter into the tent, where the knight, Rook, and General Ganger watched General Doppel hold a chair steady as Jack of Diamonds tried to yank himself out of it. Yeah! Phew! At the sight of Hatter, a mixture of shock, wonder, joy, and confusion appeared on the faces of the chessmen. General Doppel spotted him just as... Hooah! Jack of Diamonds lurched out of the chair, massaging his bruised buttocks and cursing the detestable piece of furniture that had held him captive. You'd have to be the size of a Gwyneth to fit in that thing. Then he, too, saw the mythic man. Hatter Madigan, Generals Doppel and Ganger said simultaneously. Get the surgeon, said Dodge. The knight hurried from the tent, returned in half a moment with the surgeon, who, although in awe of Hatter like everyone else, did a commendable job of hiding it and going about his business. She touched at Hatter's wound with a glowing rod to clean it up and stop the bleeding, then slipped a U-shaped sleeve of interconnected NRG nodes and fusing cores over his shoulder, giving it time to repair his broken bone, torn ligaments, muscles, veins, and tendons. She removed the sleeve and cauterized a patch of lab-grown skin over the open wound. Hatter tested his shoulder, moving his right arm in circles. With his strength slowly returning, he explained what had happened after he and Alice had plunged into the Pool of Tears. So Alice Hart is alive? Generals Doppel and Ganger breathed. This is absurd, Jack of Diamonds sputtered, having listened to Hatter's account with growing concern. Mr. Madigan, I am Jack of Diamonds. Doubtless you remember me. I was a boy before your untimely exit from Wonderland. I mean no offense when I say that I mourn for Princess Alice as much as anybody, but things have reached a crisis here. We have no time to go chasing after phantoms. I'm supposed to be dead, and yet here I am, said Hatter. I'm telling you that Alice Hart is alive, and she's old enough to return and claim her rightful place as queen. He stood. I'm going back to get her. No, let me go, Dodge said. My duty is to protect the princess. So as to ensure a future worth having for Wonderland, if I remember rightly. But look at you. You're not exactly at your physical peak. Hatter said nothing, only swiveled his arm in its new socket. With your skills and experience, you're more valuable to the Elysians than I am, Dodge said. Stay and help the generals. Preparations have to be made. Alice will need an army behind her. Isn't everyone forgetting? Jack of Diamonds whined. We have agreed to stop all Elysian activity? If we have Alice, there may be other options, Generals Doppel and Ganger said. Hatter continued. Hatter considered. The surgeon's handiwork aside, it would take at least a day or two for his shoulder to feel normal. A little strategizing and a bit of meditation might do him some good, and the queendom even more so. He handed Dodge the soggy newspaper detailing Alice's upcoming engagement party. To find the return portal, look for water where no water should be. Dodge nodded, paused as he was leaving the tent. A lot's happened around here and none of it good. There are things you should know. Ask the generals to brief you. There were indeed things Hatter needed to know. The millenary dissolved, its studies illegal. The millenary had always been a staunch supporter of white imagination, and it had been too much of a risk for red to leave it functioning. Students and graduates of the place, caps, brims, cobblers, girdlers, had been ambushed in the night by glass eyes and unceremoniously slaughtered. Among them, a woman of ordinary birth who, though not herself a member of the millenary, had overseen its administrative necessities, and for whom Hatter had cared more than any other.